Hi, folks. I'm here to talk to you about a few best practices when it comes to Okta's lifecycle management. The first item we will discuss is the username, perhaps the most important attribute in a user's profile. Now, every organization has the conversation around naming conventions, especially when moving to a new identity platform. What we recommend is to define a standard naming convention across your entire user base. That's right, I said it, a standard naming convention across your entire user base. This will make it easier for your users to remember when logging into different systems and also easier for your support team when looking up or referencing those users to help troubleshoot an issue. While this could be a big undertaking, there is no better time, like when you are implementing a new identity platform, to sync or align all systems to use the exact same username. This will create a much better user experience and eases the pain on that support team when trying to help troubleshoot a user's issue. Now, when having those conversations and coming up with a naming convention, you should avoid placing special characters in your usernames, such as spaces, quotation marks, or underscores. Reason being, when provisioning your users into all of your systems with the new username, if a system has a limitation around certain characters, the username will fail to provision. So now your naming convention is not the same across all systems because you will need to change it for that single system for the users to provision correctly. And depending on what your user system of record or source of truth may be, whether it's a directory store like Active Directory, LDAP, or even Okta's Universal Directory, or even if you use an HR system, leverage that system to perform a uniqueness check on the username. Next, we're going to talk about universal directory and attribute mappings. An attribute mapping refers to taking an attribute from a source system and sending that attribute to a target system. But where the mapping comes into play is during that process, we can specify, for example, the first name attribute in Okta gets mapped or sent to the first name attribute in a downstream application or system. Applications and directories can contain a lot of attributes, probably more than you need for your implementation. So we always recommend to only map the attributes that are required for your implementation in that downstream application. That way, you don't clutter up the user profiles more than you already have to. Now, if you have multiple authoritative sources, use Okta's attribute level mastering to ensure that the attributes are coming from the correct source of truth. Now, in mapping your attributes, you have the ability to state whether or not you want to create and update attributes in the downstream system or application, or to simply create. Now, if you're using Active Directory and you're setting your mapping based on those key AD attributes, it's our recommendation to use the create only option. That way you don't have other systems trying to update AD attributes when that AD attribute itself is coming from the correct source of truth. Let's talk a little bit about groups. Now, we all know groups are powerful when it comes to providing application access or security permissions to subsets of users that have similar roles. But if you have an HR-driven IT use case, integrations with apps like Workday, UltiPro, and Bamboo HR, they allow you to create provisioning groups or app groups in Okta. You want to leverage those for primary provisioning use cases. For example, if you want to provision an account from Okta to Active Directory, using these groups is also an easy way to reference where that source of truth is. Now, when you have complex situations, like users coming into Okta from different sources, but they need the same application access and security parameters applied, this is where you want to leverage Okta groups. Okta groups are the only group type that can contain users being mastered from any system, whether it be an HR app or an external directory store. Now, an easy way to getting users from multiple sources into those groups, into those Okta groups, is the use of group rules, where we can essentially scan the user's profile, and maybe based off of an attribute like department, we can state if the department equals sales, we will then make that user a member of the sales group, and so on. Finally, HR-driven IT implementations, also known as HR as a master, it's always a hot topic, right? A few best practices or recommendations, if this is an implementation that you are working on, is to ensure you always have alignment at the IT and HR leadership levels. This is truly an organizational decision and a project that spans these two groups. So having alignment, clear communication are both keys for its success. Now, we already talked about naming conventions earlier. However, it's not just the username. Naming convention conversations need to happen in most organizations around things like email address, phone numbers, the usernames, etc. So make sure to have those conversations about all primary attributes that you intend to push to each and every application or system. Now, I know this goes without saying, but I'm going to anyway. Before you go live, be sure to perform a quality data check between HR systems and Active Directory. Finally, when running a pilot, right, you run a pilot to confirm all of your users and proper formatting and new naming conventions have all taken place. Now, we know a pilot is a small go live. You pick a certain subset of users and perform a go live on them. This allows you to test for full confirmation and really truly sets you up for success. Just like when you're deploying software, and we always recommend deploy to a test environment to make sure all the kinks are worked out and then move to production. This is the exact same concept. Well, that's it for a few of the key Okta Lifecycle Management best practices. For more, be sure to visit our support site at support.okta.com and search for your specific use case to get tips and tricks. I hope you picked up a few tips today to aid in your success. Thanks for listening.